Ah, summer. Blue skies, green fields, and a golden warmth. Or so I'm told. I live in the north of England. I haven't really ever experienced summer. But for the medievals, it was a time of celebration for all classes. Perhaps the best time of the year for social gatherings. But work still had to be carried out in the fields, and summer was also a time of heatwaves, droughts, wildfires, plague, and fever. Welcome to Medieval Madness. Lazy, hazy, crazy days of summer. The church and agricultural calendars dominated the lives of the common medievals, and in the summer it was a case of work hard, play hard. It was a time of harvests, usually beginning in June, when the peasants had to reap the meadows to get hay and fodder for the sheep, cattle, and horses. The French author Jean de Brie, known as the Good Shepherd, wrote a treatise on sheep breeding in the mid-13th century. He recommended that from June the shepherds should get up very early, at dawn when the day was coolest, and take the livestock to pasture. There needed to be sufficient shade for the animals, and if possible, they should be moved to higher, colder areas so that they wouldn't overheat. In August, de Brie said the sheep should be stabled, or there was a risk that they would eat all of the wheat. With all that hot farm work going on, what was better than a summer party with plenty of ale and food? It could be said that summer in the Middle Ages was ushered in at Pentecost. The holiday is still celebrated today in Britain and is known as Whitsun or Whitsunday. The medieval summer was filled with important days like May Day, the Feast of the Holy Trinity, and Corpus Christi on the second Sunday after Pentecost, when there was always a public procession to celebrate the communion bread and wine. In July there was the Feast of St. Anne, Mother of the Virgin, and a celebration of the visitation of the Virgin to her cousin Elizabeth. In August it was Lammas Day and the Transfiguration of Jesus that were celebrated. People were obliged to attend church on the 1st of August, the feast day of St. Peter ad Vincula, to offer their Peter's pence, also known as smoke farthings or smoke money. This was a tax that had to be given to the church. A penny had to be paid from every house. These religious festivals were a great excuse for outdoor entertainment in the finer weather. The famous York, Chester, and Wakefield mystery plays were always held on the Feast of Corpus Christi, and others were held all over England. There were also fairs with minstrels, music, and possibly a bonfire or two as a nod back to the Celtic past. There might be dancing and summer caroling, as this was done during the summer as well as at Christmas, and most of the songs were quite bawdy rather than religious. Games, tournaments, and sports were also popular during the medieval summer. Drinking and gambling were always popular among the peasantry at any time of year, causing the cleric Robert de Brun to complain that, quote, "Dances, cards, summer games, of many such come many shames," in 1303. All that working and cavorting in the summer heat led some people down to the nearest body of water to cool off with a swim. The beautifully illustrated Book of Hours of the Duke of Berry, brother of King Charles V of France, contains an illuminated page for each month of the year. The August page shows peasants wearing hats hard at work in the fields, while a naked man is sitting on the riverbank and drying himself in the sun as his companions swim in the water. Not many medievals could swim though, and this was highlighted in a city ordinance from 14th century Paris, which read, quote, "Because in these hot days many people have had enjoyment and desire to go bathe in the Seine River, many great inconveniences have unfolded because many of these people have drowned in the river, which is a very pitiful thing. To reform the foolish minds of young people and other people who go bathe in the river, we forbid that anyone bathes naked in the river, otherwise they'll be put in jail." I can only hope that someone's warned the Olympic swimmers about this. The girls of summer. Without any protection, the common people of Northern Europe would find themselves suffering from the problems of sunburn just as they do today. Medical manuscripts contained recipes to help with problems such as the one in the 10th century Anglo-Saxon compilation known as Bold's Leech Book. They recommended, quote, "boiling in butter, tender ivy twigs, and smearing therewith." The dominant beauty standard of the time was for fair skin. This was seen as a sign of wealth and status and an indication of a woman's financial standing. Tan skin was associated with the peasants who toiled outside in the fields all day. Medieval physicians recommended that women should protect their skin with wide-brimmed hats and parasols or avoid going out in the sun altogether. The Trotula, a 12th century text on women's medicine, recommends using boiled deer tallow for roughness of the face caused by the sun. The treaty also discusses the benefits of a very useful unguent that is good for sunburn for both the treatment and prevention. The ointment was to be applied at night and left on during the day to preserve the ladies from sunburn, sort of like an early version of the sunscreens that we use today. Sadly though, the ointment consisted of 1 ounce of lily root, 2 ounces of white lead, mastic and frankincense, camphor, animal grease, and rosewater. The ointment was used by the women of Salerno, Italy to also, quote, raise the skin and colour it beautifully. We are now aware of lead poisoning and can only imagine the horrific symptoms that many of these poor women suffered when ingesting lead into their bodies. Symptoms like headache, constipation, infertility, and in some extreme cases, seizures, coma, and even death. Summer breeze doesn't make me feel fine. As far as physicians were concerned, July and August were just about the most dangerous time of year for us humans, believing that the summer air was corrupted and infected, and carried the miasma thought to bring deadly diseases. Medieval medicine followed the belief of the 4 humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, introduced by Hippocrates. These 4 substances were organised around the 4 elements, the 4 attributes of cold, hot, moist, and dry, and the 4 seasons. It was the yellow bile that was the problem in summer, as according to Bartholomew Anglicus, the sun was at its highest point and shone directly on the top of a person's head. This caused an excess of yellow bile and the dry hot humour associated with being short-tempered and easily angered. In summer, Bartholomew added, the body would heat up and then perspiration would cause it to dry and become weak. This could cause people to be affected by plagues, fevers, and other hot and dry diseases. The first confirmed outbreak of the mysterious sweating sickness was in 1485. It's possible that there may have been an outbreak as early as June, although records of the patient's symptoms aren't complete enough to be sure. According to the Croyland Chronicle, Thomas Stanley, the 1st Earl of Derby, gave sweating sickness as the reason why he didn't join Richard III's army at the Battle of Bosworth. It's not sure whether this is true, as there is speculation that Henry Tudor's army brought the sickness over from France with his French mercenaries. Nevertheless, by the summer of 1485, the disease was in England, and when the new plague hit at the beginning of Henry VII's reign, it caused anger, mass paranoia, and superstition. The epidemic hit right at the end of the War of the Roses, which saw the death of the Yorkist King Richard and the crowning of Henry Tudor. The people wanted something or someone to blame for the new disease, and some believed that God had sent the sickness to punish Henry's supporters. Cruel summer. A physician named Thomas Forestier recorded his experience of the sweating sickness and wrote about how sufferers became suddenly breathless in their final hours when loathsome vapours had gathered around the heart and lungs. Oh my god. In the mid-16th century, a physician from Shrewsbury named John Caius noted that the disease began with a sudden sense of dread and violent cold shivers, dizziness, and a headache. Then came pains in the neck, shoulders, and limbs, followed by chronic fatigue. Anytime after 1 to 3 hours, the sweating began with delirium, palpitations, heart pain, and extreme thirst. In the end, there was an irresistible need to sleep, and Caius believed that if the patient gave in to this urge, then death was inevitable. There was no immunity, and some people might contract the disease several times before dying. Most either recovered or died within 24 hours, and the disease occurred in the summer and early autumn. The epidemic hit London on the 28th of August, and by late October of 1485, sweating sickness had killed thousands of people, including 3 sheriffs, 6 aldermen, and 2 lord mayors. The cause remains unknown, although sewage, bad sanitation, and contaminated water have all been blamed for the illness at some point. A couple of known diseases have been proposed as reasons for the outbreaks, including relapsing fever spread by ticks and lice, and hantavirus, which is carried by bats and rodents. Relapsing fever usually only occurs during the summer months, but symptoms include a rash and a scab at the site of the tick bite. Hantavirus is also seasonal, and unlike most diseases that strike down children and the elderly first, hantavirus usually affects middle-aged adults, something it has in common with the sweating sickness of the Middle Ages. Hot like the summer. In 1077, the Worcester manuscript noted that it, quote, was the dry summer, and wildlife came on many shires and burned down many villages, and also many towns burned down. Just as they are today, forest fires were an ongoing problem during the medieval summer. Houses tended to be made with wooden beams, often with thatched roofs, and had rushes or straws on the floor, making them a real fire risk. The Chronicle of John Worcester also reported that fire in the air, commonly called wildfire, burnt many townships and cornfields in Derbyshire and several other regions in 1048. To make matters worse, houses were closely packed together along the narrow, windy streets of medieval towns and cities. Shops were usually made from flammable materials as well, and then there were stables and wooden bridges. Parisians were ordered to keep a pot next to their door in case of fire during the hot months. Most people have heard of the Great Fire of London of 1666, but there was another devastating fire in the city long before that in 1212. In John Stow's summary of the English Chronicles, he claimed that around 3,000 lives were lost. The fire began in early July just south of the River Thames. It destroyed a church and Borough High Street before reaching London Bridge. There, high winds spread burning embers across the bridge, and the blaze quickly spread to the other side of the river. Many people were trapped on London Bridge between the two walls of flame as the wooden shops and homes on the bridge caught alight. Those who did not die in the fire jumped into the river and drowned. Only the bridge, which was made from stone, survived. Medieval summers were very much like our own. People tried to cool off by swimming, finding shade, and using sunscreen to protect themselves. Work still went on, but the medievals were able to enjoy more outdoor activities in the fairer weather. For them though, summer was a particularly dangerous time because of disease and wildfires, a threat we are also all too aware of ourselves because of the climate emergency. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Medieval Madness. Please do subscribe if you're enjoying these videos, and I'll see you next week for another one. Until then, I hope you have an awesome week. Cheers!